Hello, today we're going to make a beaded bezel for a cabochon using peyote stitch. This is definitely not a beginner's tutorial, but if you have a basic understanding of flat peyote stitch, you can totally do this. So let's get started. Okay, so let's look at our supplies. I have a cabochon. This is an Amazonite cabochon. So pretty. It's 40 by 30 millimeters. And I have seed beads. Well, these are Delica beads, this first one, size 11 Delica beads, the size I normally use. But then these other three are size 15 rounds. I'm just going to show you everything up close so you can see the Delica bead is just bigger than the 15s and it is cylindrical rather than round. I also have a size 12 beading needle. I have these 3 millimeter red jasper beads, which are just so pretty. And I have a lot of findings here. So for my findings, I have 2 crimp beads. Those little tube beads are crimp beads. I have a lobster claw clasp. I have a closed jump ring, and I have 2 wire guards. And that is going to do it for my findings. I also have, I'm using this beading wire. It's Beadalon. It is silver colored and 49 strands. I couldn't show you the full label because I can't get that sticker off of there. But here are the measurements. That's what I'm using. I like this one a lot. And I also have Fireline, which I'm going to do the bead work with, in a 6-pound weight and in a smoke color. Oh, and additionally, I also have scissors and crimping pliers and some regular pliers, which if you don't have crimping pliers, you could totally use those. So to get started, I've cut about 5 feet of my Fireline beading thread, and I am picking a random bead that I'm just going to make a little slip bead with. So I take the bead, slide it down to the end of my thread, come back around and loop, and we're going to pull this off later, but it's just going to be useful in the beginning to hold our beads in place. I have looked online and I have found that it takes about 88 delicate beads to begin a bezel for a 40 by 30 cabochon. So that's what I'm going to start with. And I am going to come around back through the first bead in that loop of 88 beads, and I'm going to take a look. But I'm going to find out that 88 is actually not going to work for this cabochon that I have. They're all just a little bit different. So it's really important that you measure yourself. It's a good starting point, but I see it is too big. And so I'm going to take off 2 beads. The most important thing in this first round of beads is that you use an even number. An odd number is going to mess up your count. So I'm going to take off 2 beads and I'm going to come back in here and do the same thing. Bring my needle back through the first bead, and those 86 beads is what I have now. And then I'm going to take a look again. And that is perfect. That's exactly what I want. And that's what I'm going to work with. Okay, so now we are ready to start weaving our peyote stitch. So I'm going to pick up 1 bead and I'm going to skip a bead and then go through the following bead. And if you are familiar with flat peyote stitch, then this is going to come very easily to you. I want to move that bead into place because we want them to be sitting next to each other in a little triangle like that. Sometimes you just have to help them out, especially in the beginning. So then I pick up another bead, skip a bead, bring my needle through the following bead. And I'm going to keep going around this loop like that. And you want to keep tightening up your loop by pulling that tail thread. So I'm going to do this again. Skip a bead, go through the following bead. And when you are done going all the way around that loop, meet me back here and we'll step up to the next row. Here we are at the end of our first row. And now you can see I'm going to do my last bead in this row. So I skipped a bead, go through the next bead, and now I have nowhere to go. So I'm going to go up into that bead that we added in the last row. So I go up there. And then for the rest of this row, I'm going to be adding beads in between these up beads. So all of the beads that are sort of sticking up, we put a bead in between all of those. So when you get to the end of that row, meet me back here and we will do it again. Okay, so here we are at the end of that row, and I'm going to do the same thing, step up to the previous row, and then work through the up beads of that row. And I'm going to do one more complete row before I size it to my cabochon and just see where we are and start to think about when we are going to move on to the smaller beads. This really is just a matter of feeling your cabochon because they're all a little bit different. So here I am at the end of that next row. And now I'm just going to pull it tight and I'm going to just take a look and see how everything is coming together here. And that is starting to look very cute. So I'm happy with that, but we definitely need to keep adding rows. Take a look at the front and the back. And what we do is when we get to a place where we're ready to start getting smaller, then we'll add the size 15 beads. But for now, I have determined that I need another row of the size 11 Delicas. Okay, so if you are keeping track, that is now my 5th row of Delicas completed. And now I'm going to take a look and see how it fits on the cabochon. You want to be able to cover all the edges with the Delica beads. And so just want a snug fit like that. And we're going to use the smaller beads to tighten up the front and the back. So I really like the way that is fitting. And I think um, it's nice and flat on the back. And I've covered all the edges in the front. And now I'm getting to the part where the beads the cabochon sort of slopes. So now I'm ready to start adding the smaller beads. And so I'm going to use this yellow first, this nice mustard yellow, in a size 15. And I'm going to make a whole loop of this yellow. And as we start to begin to make loops with these smaller beads, the bezel setting that we're creating will naturally sort of curve in on itself. You don't have to pull too tightly. It will just start to naturally happen. So here I am at the end of that row. And I know I definitely want to do a second row of yellow in order to begin closing in the cabochon. So I'm going to do that, make one more row of yellow. So do that, get your 2 rows done, meet me back here. And then we're probably going to add another one. I'm going to use the brown now for this 3rd row of size 15s. And we're just going to take a look so you can see. So this is starting to close in nicely on top so that it's not going to be able to slide through, but we still definitely want another row. And so much about setting stones is just really feeling the stone. Your first one isn't going to be perfect, and that's okay. Like, this is an art, and it's sort of like a love language to be able to sort of finesse this to get it to where you want to be. So don't get frustrated. You could totally do this. Just take your time, and you're going to be so excited when you do it. So I'm going to go around with this row of brown beads, and that's going to tighten it up just a little bit more. And there we go. I'm at the end of that one. And then I'm going to try this cabochon again. And now we're getting a nice snug fit. And I am ready to start adding size 15s to the back of it. So to really close this in there. So in order to do that, I'm going to need to move my thread to the back of the cabochon. So I weave back and forth and make my way slowly to the back side. Okay, so once I am in the back, I'm going to pick one of those up beads in the back, and then I'm just going to work a row of peyote stitch right around the back using my size 15-0 beads, and just work one of those through each one of the up beads on the back. So do a whole round like that. Somehow I'm ended up going the opposite direction, but that's okay. You get the picture. So just one size 15 between each of those in the back. I'm using the same exact color, so it sort of disappears, but it is a smaller bead. Here I am at the end of that row, and we're going to take a look again. And now you start to see that it is closing in on the back too, which is what we want. And I'm definitely going to need another row, so I'm going to do that. Adding in a second row of these size 15 seed beads. And you will see as you go and you start to sort of pull your thread tight, things are going to start closing in. And it's not going to happen right away. It might take 2 or 3 rows, so don't tug too hard. It will just sort of happen naturally. So here I've taken it off, so I could just finish up that row, and then I'm going to check again. And it's just so much about the finesse of this, right? And once you get good at it, you can do any sort of stone. Here we are. That is looking good, but we're definitely going to need another row. So I'm going to go ahead and do another row. But I've also realized my thread is running low. So before it gets dangerously low and I have nothing to work with, I'm going to go ahead and replace that thread. And then we'll be able to finish this up. So I'm just checking. You just sort of feel it. You want to feel it. I don't know. It's just, I mean, it really can be a science, but the thing is that all of these stones are so different, and it's good to be able to be flexible. Because then you could do like beach stones, beach glass. You could put whatever you want. You can make a bezel for it out of beads, which is so cool. So I'm just taking my thread and I'm weaving it back in now so that I can lock that in place and add a new thread. So to do that, I'm just weaving back into the work here. I'm going to go back and forth a few times and around a couple groups of beads. So I like to find 2 neighbor beads and sort of loop around them. Creates tension, so this isn't going to come apart. If you watch my other videos, you're totally familiar with this. So get that done. If you need to replace your thread, do that. And I'm going to clip that, add another thread, anchor it in the same manner. And then we're going to get started on adding more beads to the back of this bezel. And with this round of beads, I'm pretty sure we're going to close it in now. So here we are. We're going to add another round of the size 15O beads and just work our way around the circle until we are at the end. So you keep working that. Meet me back here. Okay, so now I'm finishing up this row. I have 3 rows of the size 15Os. And now you can see that this is really closing in on itself now. I'm quite happy with that. It's snug in there. So I'm just going to finish up this row. And then I'm actually going to add another row to the front because that is what I think is necessary. So as I said, it's not an exact science. So I'm finishing up this row and then I sort of feel it out. I'm going to check out the front and I know that I want to put another row there. So I'm working my needle to the front and now I'm going to add another row of these brown beads to the front. I guess they're more of a brick red than a brown really. So I'm just going to do one more round of those in the front so that I know that it is very secure in there. And there we go. And the thing is, once this is in here, it's really snug. Like it's not going to fall out. I haven't used any glue. If you do feel it's loose, you always could use some jeweler's glue in the back to glue it into place. But that is not something I normally do. Because if you do it right, it should be really snug in there, and then you don't have to compromise the stone or the beads with the jeweler's glue. So there we go. I'm very happy with that. And now I want to add a sort of bail at the top to be able to hold our necklace. So I'm going to work my needle over to the top there. And what I want to do is find the center, and the bail I'm going to make is 4 beads wide. Also, you want it to be an even number again, because you don't want to mess around with odd count peyote stitch when you are working with this sort of beadwork. So I have found my center. And what I want to do is create a flat peyote stitch off of the peyote stitch that's already there, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to pick up a bead. I'm exiting one bead. I've picked up a bead and I'm going to skip that little space in between. And then I'm going through this next bead. We're going to get a closer look in 1 second. Okay, so I'm picking up my next bead and there you go. So I'm going to skip the sort of in between spaces and go through the next bead that is in my direct line. So if I'm going straight across in a line, you'll have where the beads come together and then you have a bead, and where the beads come together and then a bead. So I'm going through the beads and skipping where the beads come together in the previous row. So there I have 4 beads I've woven across the top. And then I'm going to come back the opposite direction, just like I was weaving a flat peyote stitch even count ring. So I pick up one bead, come back through that next up bead. I'm going to pick up a second bead, come through the next up bead. I should have got rid of all these tails and woven them in, but I get so excited for this part to just see it come together that I just can't be bothered with the tails. So pick up another bead, come through the next up bead, another bead, come through the next up bead, and there you go. So you're going to keep working this back and forth, just like you were making a peyote stitch ring, until you get a nice long piece like this. And you want it to be long enough to attach in the back. And you want to have the up beads sort of fit into the down beads on the other side. You find a spot where that's going to weave into. And you also want to make sure it's long enough to fit over whatever chain you're going to be using. And my chain is going to be made out of these carnelian or this red jasper beads. So I have to make sure it's long enough and wide enough to fit that in there comfortably. So I'm checking that now. And I'm feeling happy with that size. And so I'm going to go ahead and attach that piece of peyote to the cabochon. Now, this is probably one of the trickiest parts of this whole project, but you just have to really find the right spot. So I found this sort of spot where the up beads fit into the down beads. It fits together like a little zipper. And then I'm going to take my needle from the bail into the previous beadwork, and then I'm going to go back and forth, just like I was closing up a ring. So I'm going to go through the down bead on one side, the up bead on the other side, and take this slowly, and then the down bead on the other side, like so. Back across the aisle to the one that's sticking up on that side, and go back and forth across like this until it is all attached. Take your time here, one bead at a time. This is where it's very easy to break a bead. So make sure you have the right size needle. You want a size 12 or smaller, so that you are not forcing something too large through these needles, or through these beads, which will break them. They are glass beads, and they will break, which is scary if you've come this far. So I'm all the way across. There we go. And I have the other side. And now I just want to reinforce both of these edges. So I'm going to go back and forth through this one I just added. And then I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to go back and forth across that original row, because that's where all of the weight of your pendant is going to be. It's going to be on those two seams. So you want those two seams to be extra strong. So reinforce both of those. Meet me back here and we will create the necklace, which is exciting because it means we're almost done. So see you in a second. Okay, so I'm done reinforcing my bail on both sides. Now I'm just going to take all of these end threads and weave them into my work and make them secure. Make sure you go back and forth a few times so you've created enough tension that these threads aren't going to come unraveled. Do that with all of your little end bits and then meet me back here. Okay, so now I'm ready to create my necklace part to go with this pendant. I'm going to work right off the spool of wire here so that I don't cut any more or less than I need. And first I put on my crimp bead, and then I'm going to put on some size 11 Delicas, however many you want, depending on how long you want this necklace to be. But I'm going to add about 10 here. And this is just so I could tuck the tail of my wire in at the end, because I know that these red jasper beads, I can't fit the wire through twice, but with the Delicas, I can. So I'm just going to use those Delicas to hide the wire at the end. I'm going to add all my beads on here. And then when I get to the other end, I'm going to add more Delicas. And on this side, you are going to see how I end it. So I put a crimp bead on, and then I'm going to put my cabochon on, my pendant. Shouldn't be so difficult. Okay, here we are. We have threaded that. And then next, I'm going to add a wire guard. So I come through one side of the wire guard and then down through the other side of the wire guard, like so. And then I'm going to put on my lobster claw, loop that right over so it's sitting on the wire guard. And then I'm going to pull, I only want like an inch tail. I don't want to waste wire here. So I pull that down. I'm going to slide the beads all back in that direction. And next I'm going to pull the crimp tube up underneath the tail and the threading part of the thread. So here we go. I've pulled that up. I want to get that tight. I don't want any wire sort of exposed between the crimp tube and the wire guard if I can help it. So I have that very tight, and now I'm going to put it between that little V part of my crimping pliers. And what that does, when I press it down, it makes a fold in the middle of the crimp tube like that. So that is how that looks. And then I'm going to squeeze it from the sides to close that little bend. So it's made the bend. Now I'm closing it nice and flat. And this is what we're left with. And that isn't going to go anywhere. So now I can pull all the beads down towards that end. I want to take that little tail, and this is why I put those delicate beads there, so I could hide the tail in there. So I'm going to put the tail through all these delicate beads, and then clip what is left over. There's one more. Sometimes it's a bit tricky, but I know they fit. See, if you see, I was just showing you that the other beads don't fit. You can't fit two widths through the whole of those. So I clip off my little end. Make sure there isn't, a pokey bit there. And then you can move to the other end. So now on the other end, we're going to do something very similar. I'm going to speed through this now. Now you could clip your thread off the roll. So I'm going to give myself maybe like 2.5 inches to work with. Clip that, add my wire guard in the same way. And then I'm going to add my jump ring so I could clasp onto it. And then this side's a bit trickier because you don't have as much sort of room to play with when you're wiggling things through. So what I usually end up doing is using my pliers. You could just use the pliers to sort of nudge the wire through and pull the wire through. You want to get it tight. You don't want those spaces in between the beads. So use your pliers to help you with that. So see, if you just take your plier and sort of slide it through those beads, it's going to help you get to where you need to be, and then pull it. So I'm going to work through that. And then after that, I will do my crimp bead in the same manner. So first I fold it in half with the little V part of my crimping pliers, and then I squeeze it flat the other way. Finally, I'm going to clip off this little tail, and there we have it. We have made a bezel for a cabochon using seed beads. It's super cute. This necklace is giving me autumn vibes 100%. I hope you've enjoyed this. And I think once you have this skill, you are going to want to set everything in beads because that's what I always want to do. Happy beading, happy autumn, and thank you for watching. And I hope you will subscribe. All right, see you soon. Bye.